Thank you for joining us for Power Hour today. Um, Power Hour is hosted by Women in Energy, which is a community of women who are working as professionals in the clean energy space in Pakistan. We are very happy to be hosting Power Hour. Today we have a really exciting and a very different group of people with us today. And in the interest of keeping it short and sweet, we're going to wrap up hopefully within the next half an hour. I'm Anam Zev and I'm very happy to be hosting. Very quickly, I will quote Malala Yousafzai, when the whole world is silent, even one voice becomes important. Increasingly, we're seeing in Pakistan that it's not just one voice, it's many voices. And many of those voices are increasingly the voices of women and girls who are taking a very big stand on the issue of climate change. We are very privileged to have with us today 6 young women. We are still waiting on one of our friends to join us, but right now we're joined by 5 of our friends who are taking climate change activism to the next level. This year, these young women have been instrumental in organizing climate change strikes and demonstrations in their own cities. So without further ado, I'm going to get everyone to quickly introduce themselves, tell us your name, and tell us how old you are. I'll start with Lahore. Nida, you're muted.
All right. Hello and assalamu alaikum to everyone. My name is Nida Afzal and I'm from Lahore, belonging to Climate Action PK and also many other organizations, student organizations and social organizations. And I am a climate, you can say, activist and a researcher residing in Lahore. And I have been working around the theme of climate crisis and sustainable cities for 3 years now. And my research is also based on climate activism. And I really want to congratulate Women in Energy and this whole panel and the fellow panelists that, yes, this year we pulled off a climate strike in different cities excellently, brilliantly, and a big part was played by my fellow panelists and residing in different cities like Islamabad. And I'm really happy to be at this panel with you all. And thank you so much for inviting me. And my age is, I'm like 21 years old. So yeah, like a young adult now. But yes, participating in climate awareness for years now. So yeah, that's my introduction.
Thank you so much, Nida. Nida has given a really great background to the activism. I'm going to move over to Karachi and ask Farah to very quickly introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Farah Manavar. I am 16 and I'm from Karachi and I'm really happy to be here.
We're very happy to have you, Farah. Now let's move to Islamabad. We'll go Rida, Amira, and Hania.
Okay, I'm Rida and I'm founder Impact and I'm just 18.
Thank you, Rida.
I'm Amira Adil and I'm 23 years old and I'm the founder of climate.org.
Hi, Hania.
Okay, it's my turn. My name is Hania Imran. I'm a youth climate activist. I'm 17 and I started the Youth Climate Activist Pakistan group. So yeah, thank you.
So as the audience can probably tell, we have a group of very young women, but let me assure you, very dynamic and very dedicated young women who are leading the charge for climate activism in Pakistan. There was a climate march and strike on a very large scale in 2019, and it was organized by Climate Action Pakistan in many cities. Of course, 2020, the world has turned upside down, and we weren't able to do it on such a scale because of the COVID crisis. However, these young women were leading the charge in their cities as far as the climate strike was concerned. So I'm going to take advantage of the fact that Hania has just introduced herself, and I'm going to ask Hania to please tell us what got you into climate activism. And the rest of you can think about your answers too, because I'd like to hear from all of you.
Okay, so what got me into climate activism was first when I was in third grade, right? हम लोगों को पढ़ाया जा रहा था climate change by our social studies वाला subject. तो उसमें हम लोगों को like बहुत थोड़ा सा बताया था what global warming was, and because I was so young, so I didn't really understand the difference between the environment and climate change and global warming. So I thought one of the biggest problems was everybody was littering. And so I went home and I made don't litter posters, and then I went to school and gave them out to people. So that's how initially it started. That was the first thing I did for the environment, with climate change in my mind. And then when I was in ninth grade, when my 14th birthday was coming up, and I watched a documentary called Before the Flood, और उससे देख के फिर मुझे एहसास हुआ कि कितना बड़ा issue है, and I was very very concerned, and I remember I cried all night. And yeah, that's pretty much I planted 14 trees on my 14th birthday, and the first thing I did was I went to my friends and I talked to them about it, and even with my parents and everybody, but nobody really sort of understood the concern. And yeah, that's how it started.
That's really amazing, Hania, that you've been doing this for so long. And it's so interesting how communications, number one, so media and documentaries have played a role in this. And secondly, that curriculum is also a very good way to get people interested in talking about climate change. I'm going to move to Nita. Nita, how was your experience and what made you interested in climate change?
Actually, my experience was not initiated at a very young age, and I really appreciate everyone who has been doing a lot for many years now. My interest initiated when I was seeing a lot of people being sick because of dirty water, because they didn't have access to proper public health facilities. And the way I had been reading, and I was observing how waste was affecting people in a really bad way, because because of the lung diseases and the environmental diseases they were having, like diarrhea and other very horrible diseases. uh, so that thing got me into research, and when I researched myself about a lot of these crises and health crisis, and how a number of children die because of air pollution, then I got into climate research and climate activism, and that became the goal of my life, that yes, I really want to do a lot more about climate change. Rather than thinking just about myself, I started thinking beyond myself, and that's how I really think that I transformed. And that's how it started.
Again, very interesting, Nita, because at the end of the day, you've highlighted that climate change is very much a social justice issue. And that's something that all of us want to work towards. Farah, how about you? What got you interested? As one of the youngest people here today, what do you think you'd like to tell us?
Yeah, so I guess I've always known that climate change was a thing, and don't litter, don't leave the tap on while you're brushing your teeth, that kind of thing. But I think it's been 2 years since I actively started participating, because recently I joined an organization called Chalkback and Transform Education, which is a project underneath the United Nations Girls Education Initiative. I'm co-leading a working collective, and through that, I've learned a lot more about climate change and how it's not only just an environmental issue, but it's, like you said, a social issue, an intergenerational issue. And that really got me more, it really encouraged me to do more research and to, just gain more understanding and start working on it on a bigger level, because of course we are accountable for ourselves, but it's also your conglomerates, your multinational corporations, and we really need to start holding people accountable and make proper changes and not just performative discussions. So yeah.
Cool, Farah. I think that you're completely correct. It's very unfortunate that the burden of responsibility for climate change is somehow being shifted from the big corporates and conglomerates onto the individuals, where we're being told that our behavior is causing climate change when actually it's the big businesses that are doing it. Amira, let me ask you what got you interested.
I have a story similar to Hania's. We went on a vacation to Naran and Kakan some 6-7 years ago, and I saw that the lake Saif al Muluk, udhar bahut gand logon ne kiya hua tha. There were plastic bags floating on the lake, and that got me really mad. I started picking up the bags and throwing them in the bin that was nearby. So that was the time when I was deciding what to do for my university, selecting my major. So my mom said, "Oh, you should apply to environmental sciences. Why don't you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's a good idea. I should do that." And that's how I got into environmental engineering at NAS. And from then on, it was just an academic journey mostly. And I just got deeper into it, and climate activism just sort of popped up in the way.
I think, Amira, that's also a very valid point. I think most of us have made our initial foray into this sector based on pollution, actually. I really think because that's one of the most visible manifestations for us. And that's what gets us interested, actually. And it's also a problem that can be tackled relatively easier than climate change. So thank you. And finally, I'm going to move to Rida. So Rida, tell us about what got you interested in climate change.
Okay, so what got me into climate change was actually the climate crisis itself. I was very young when I got affected by climate change and the environment we have created. I got asthma and I got allergies, and I realized that this is something that is affecting me, so it might be affecting a lot of other people as well, and the future generations that are to come. So I wanted to do something for them. I don't want them to go through the same thing that I've been going through. So I guess that was the only thing that got me into climate activism.
Thank you so much, Rida. Don't mute yet because I'm going to ask you the next question as well. But very interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. At the heart of what we do for climate change is basically to ensure that our future generations don't suffer because of our actions. So thank you very much for highlighting that as well. My next question actually is the top three messages that you have for climate change. What are the messages that you're trying to give to a global audience and to a national audience? What is your activism about? What are your messages that you're trying to give to the world? Can you tell me maybe three of your key messages that you want to give?
All right. So the first message is to educate ourselves. Just like we educate ourselves on the topics of education and other human rights, women's rights, children's rights, we need to educate ourselves on climate rights and the rights of plants, the rights of the environment we have. So that is one thing. And then the awareness we need to create as individuals, and the responsibility we need to take as individuals and as citizens. And the
रिता आपका थोड़ा सा जो है internet is pausing for some reason.
Governments to act and tell our governments you can other person.
I'm so sorry, Rida, your voice was breaking up. I don't know if it was breaking up for everyone or just for me. No, maybe it was just for me. Acha. So thank you so much. I'm going to move over to Nida. So Nida, what are some of the messages that you want to give world leaders as well as what you want to give our own leaders at the national and maybe even at the local level in terms of your demands on climate action?
So my very first demand would be to the global leaders that declare a climate emergency. The way politics has been and is still ignoring science and how it's not paying heed to the importance of Mother Nature, that needs to change, and the governments all over the world need to understand what is happening right now, and it is a situation of climate emergency. So to our national leaders and the international leaders, my first demand will be declare a climate and a public health emergency. Then my second demand would be inclusion of indigenous people in the decision making and the law making process, which is one of the biggest crises we have in our societies, that the indigenous people who belong to the land, who are still connected to the mother nature, they're not included in any of the decision. Their consent is not taken for any of their land usage. And you know better how the indigenous people are treated in different countries and our country as well. So inclusion of indigenous people in the decision making processes. And the third demand, I guess, will be um, from the leaders to the public, that climate crisis is equal to social justice. Climate crisis and climate justice, the issue of climate justice is political and is equal to social justice. It is equal to gender justice. It is equal to economic justice. So do not, people of different countries, even the rich countries, turn it to some scientific issue and technical issue, and they try to nag around the technocratic terminologies. Just stop doing that. And this is a social issue, so treat it like a human rights issue and move forward towards the people. Do not again make policies which cannot be implemented, but come into the people, come into the masses, and then decide what you really want to do. And yes, climate justice is equal to social justice, the three key issues.
Excellent, Nida. This has really hit the nail on the head. I think you've pointed out some of the most important issues that are facing us, and especially the issue of human rights and the issue of urgency. It has to be treated urgently. We need to declare an emergency. You can't. Recently, I was listening to a podcast where they said, the inaction on climate change is actually equivalent to if you go to your doctor and your doctor says if you continue to smoke cigarettes, you're going to die in the next 5 years. And you're like, okay, so I'll stop smoking after 5 years now. So the signs are there. We know that it's killing us, and yet we're not taking action on it. So with that, I'm going to move to Amira. So Amira, can you tell me what three of your biggest demands on climate activism and action?
Yeah, so I was actually watching a documentary yesterday for a class, and it was about people who sow doubt about climate change in other people's minds, in the public mind of the public. And there was this one guy called Mike Moreno. He enjoyed harassing climate scientists. So he would post their emails online and tell climate skeptics to go and harass them, and they got death threats, and it was really disturbing for the climate scientists themselves. And there's a parallel to be seen here, like ExxonMobil. You would all know about ExxonMobil, and they actually kept this information about climate change from us for about over 50 years now. They had the information in the 1940s and the 1950s, the same exact information that our scientists have now. And they were so skilled in their art that they knew what they were doing from a very long time. And they are not being faced with any existential threat as such. They're not being charged with any existential fines, or really consequential actions are not being taken against them. So the biggest thing that I think is important right now, it's that we need to start to crack down on people like these. People who have been lying to us, people who have been affecting us. We need to crack down on oil companies. We need to take their money and use it to fix climate change. Because everyone talks about how are we going to finance climate action, and how are we going to implement these solutions? Where is the technology, innovation, and research and funding going to come from? They have the scientists, they have the resources, they have the money, and they're the culprits. So we really need to start focusing on what the real problems are here. So that is one thing. Stop taking it as a joke, and we need to incorporate sustainability into every one of our sectors right now. The second thing I would like to say to activists, especially young activists, because they're the people who inspire me the most, the people that are younger than me right now. I want to tell them not to overwhelm themselves with this, because we are going to fix this. This is going to happen. Ultimately, it always happens the right मतलब सही हमेशा जीत जाता है, झूठ हमेशा हार जाता है. So we are going to fix this. There is action going on. This is the decade that we're going to do this thing. And I believe in that wholeheartedly. So don't overwhelm yourself to the point that you can't function. Keep your lives functioning. Enjoy your lives because you deserve to have your youth as well. This is not just your fight. This is everyone's fight. And the last thing I want to say to everyone is that we need to talk about this more, because it doesn't matter whether you're a climate scientist. You don't need to be like an expert to do something about climate change. You just need to talk about it. Talk about it to people who know about stuff. Talk about it to children. Talk about it to people who don't know about this thing. We just need it to be included in conversations. You never know who's going to have the next big idea on this. So yeah, those are my 3 points.
Thank you so much, Amira. One of the things that I'm taking away from what you said is basically the need to make climate change more accessible for everyone, not getting lost in the jargon and the technical terminologies and making it more everyday. I'm going to move on to Farah. So Farah, same question.
Yeah, of course. So I guess number one is that we can't stop. Because sure, maybe 1 year, carbon emission levels will be lower, but it's not just carbon emissions. Like, the problem of climate change has so many different things linked, and we can't take a break because we've already come so far that we can't, I guess, get complacent with what we're doing, and we just need to keep going. Number two, inclusivity in climate action. So we can't gentrify the process of climate action. Like I think Nida said, that we should involve the, indigenous people in the decision making and everything. And I think that's so important, especially because, so many different, I guess, marginalized people and minorities especially have, their cultural practices and beliefs that can actually really help us in the process of climate action. And thirdly, stop making excuses, because even during COVID, I guess there was a lot of, I'd say, backlash against the climate strikes that, we tried to hold, saying, oh, during a pandemic. But climate action hasn't stopped. It's not going to stop. And it is definitely not taking a break during the pandemic. And yeah, I think that was just a way to kind of push it under the rug for, big corporations to not be held accountable. And yeah, there's been that really long debate about, the environment versus the economy. And I think people really need to grasp the idea that there's not going to be an economy if the climate gets any worse. So yeah, that's it for me.
Very relevant comments. And I really like how you're very aware of who the actual culprits are and you keep calling them out. Well done. Finally, I'm going to move on to Hania. So Hania, same question.
Okay, so this one is for the first message I have would be for normal people and the activism community. So basically, I learned this like a few years ago, and it wasn't related to climate at that time, but I think now it does apply, which is basically step up and then step back. So that means that, मतलब आप खड़े हो और इसके बारे में बोलो, but at the same time मतलब amplify मतलब जो marginalized communities है, सनिदा ने भी बोला कि हमें include करने की ज़रूरत है indigenous communities को, औरतों को, मतलब जो youth है जो affect हो रही है front lines पे उन लोगों को, because अभी जो मतलब sort of even when you say activism or climate activism, तो पहली चीज लोगों के दिमाग में यही आती है कि Greta Thunberg, or maybe it's a lot of European white female activists that are the front lines. And I mean, what they're doing is great and that's entirely okay, but also at the same time, the people that are actually being affected do not have a seat at the table. They don't. And then I mean, it's like sort of that savior complex type thing where we want to be the voice for the voiceless, but I feel like nobody is voiceless. They just don't have the mic, but we do, and we have to be able to pass them that mic, and we have to be able to amplify their voices, and we have to be able to give them that sort of that platform and that stage. And I have to work on this as well, but just something to sort of think about and work on. And then secondly, I don't And a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people, even all the climate activists here, they ask you what's one of the most important issues that you feel like that needs to be worked on in regards to climate change in Pakistan or elsewhere or in the world. And each time I say to them that I don't think there is one issue in climate change that needs to be worked on, because there are just too many. And there are too many ways that people are being affected. There are too many people that are suffering, and a lot of people don't even realize that they're suffering because of climate change. So for example, like right now in Islamabad, there's these winds going on, and there's such dry winds, and I don't know if it's climate change, but it does feel like it, because I've been having nosebleeds for the last 2 days, and I've never ever in my life had nosebleeds, or I've never in my life experienced this kind of weather. I've lived in Islamabad my whole life. So yeah, something definitely is changing, and we have to be able to call it out and say that, what, this is climate change, and this is injustice, and this is happening to us, and it is happening to other people, and we need to be able to amplify their voices. And to like global governments and our government, and at this point, like, we know when you're greenwashing, we know when you're not being honest, we know when you're doing something just for the sake of it or just for the show of it. And we know when you're being genuine, and we aren't seeing any genuineness, we aren't seeing any seriousness. And unless and until we don't see that seriousness, we won't stop. And yeah, that's basically my message to them. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Hania. It's so interesting that you mentioned the greenwashing and that it's not enough. Incidentally, the theme for this year's climate strikes and climate demonstrations was no more empty promises. And very interestingly, this came out in conjunction with when countries who are signatories to the UNFCCC were submitting their updated or their revised NDCs, which are the nationally determined contributions, which are essentially the pledges for how much each country is going to reduce its carbon emissions. These were initially submitted in 2015-16. And this 2020 was the deadline for countries to resubmit their applications and say how much more they're willing to do and how much more they're willing to invest. And unfortunately, around the same time that we were having our protest, we found that once again, it was empty promises, and that the emissions cuts are really not going to meet the targets that are required at this stage. So on a global level, all countries have really got a lot of work and a lot of homework to do. So thank you all very much for all of the very interesting inputs. We're just going to end pretty soon, but as a closing call, I want to ask you two things each. The first question is, how would you encourage other young people, and particularly young women, to start being more active in terms of climate change? What are the kind of platforms they can join? What are the kind of initiatives they can take within their own schools, their own universities, their own workplaces, or even at the family level? What can you do? And the second one is, what are your upcoming plans? In the interest of time, I'm going to ask you all to please keep it short, 1 minute each, so we can wrap up there. So let me start off with Nida. Nida, what would you like to say?
I was not hoping that I'd be the first. So, but yeah, it's okay. So the very first thing I would like to say to the people, to everyone who's hearing us, or it's really not easy to talk about all of this without being vulnerable, because we ourselves go through a lot of climate anxiety and climate grief, but it's all okay. The thing I really want to tell everyone is that living on Earth is an ecological habit. We are connected to the Mother Nature in each and everything we do. Even as Vandana Shiva says, that eating is an ecological habit. That's why we need to know where our grains are coming from, and if the farmers who are feeding us are getting the same rights as us. So when we think beyond ourselves, when we think of us as an ecological beings, जो सोच हमसे दूर कर दी गई है सरमायादारी निज़ाम में रहने की वजह से, हम सिर्फ अपनी जिंदगियों में उसको ठीक करने में, उसको बेहतर करने में लगे हुए हैं, टाइम के साथ साथ ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा और डोमिनेंट से डोमिनेंट बनना चाहते हैं, मगर हमें इस सब चीज़ों से पलट कर दोबारा इज्तमाइयत की तरफ आने की ज़रूरत पड़ चुकी है, और हमें ये करने की ज़रूरत है कि हम सोसाइटी के बारे में सोचें और अपनी ज़ात से बालातर होकर सोचें। तो सबसे पहले ये कि थिंक बियॉन्ड योरसेल्फ, And this is what will keep us going, and this is what can change the world. As Amira said, that we can fix this, and we are fixing this in this decade. So yeah, just think beyond yourself and what we are up to. Yes, Climate Action Pakistan will keep doing its work, and we will come up with more strikes in Lahore and other cities. So please join us whenever you can and be part of the climate debates, because this is what is really important. If no one tells you, you have to tell yourself that this is what is really important, and that we have to move on towards a green future.
Exactly. Thank you, Nida. That was excellent. Rida, can I ask you what your thoughts are?
Okay, सबसे पहली बात तो ये कि हर किसी की आवाज matters and you just need to raise your voice, you just need to give it your all. और आप बाहर निकलें, आप जब बोलेंगे आपको सुना जाएगा, because I remember I was only 9 years old when I started all this and I was not heard, but today when I'm 18 I'm heard and I'm given value. So you just need to raise your voice and you'll be heard. And what are my future plans? We're involved with government and we're trying to bring more and more policies, and we're trying to involve the youth in policy making, and we're trying to bring this crisis to the parliament, and ताकि parliament में भी इसके बारे में debate हो, इसके बारे में बात हो, क्योंकि अगर आज देखें तो नहीं होती. So I guess that is our next point and what we're doing.
Wonderful. Farah, can I move to you next?
Yeah, of course. What I just generally say to everyone is that, talk about it, because for me, things like Women in Energy and Climate Action Pakistan, they really made me more empowered, I guess. And it's really great to see, getting advice and just talking to older people like you guys about this. It really gives me hope. It encourages me to do more. And in Climate Action Pakistan, I see other people doing O levels and A levels in different cities, and it makes me think that I'm not alone in this, because sometimes it really feels like it does. You read the news and sometimes you just feel so overwhelmed and really hopeless, nothing's actually happening. But being surrounded by like-minded individuals is really important, I think. So yeah, I think just talk about it to your family, in school, and I think that's really important.
Thank you so much, Farah. Now let me ask Hania.
Okay, so what really advanced my own climate activism pandemic से पहले मैं जो करती थी वो usually अकेले करती थी या कुछ लोगों के साथ, मगर फिर जो यूथ क्लाइमेट एक्टिविस्ट पाकिस्तान है, जो हमारा व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप है, उसमें sort of connecting with so many other activists makes you feel like अच्छा खाली मैं नहीं हूँ, ये इतने ज़्यादा लोग हैं जो इसके बारे में genuinely they care and they want to do something about it. And also globally, there's hundreds of thousands of activists that are working on climate change and issues that come under climate change and are interconnected. So that is one of the I think most important things. Yeah, and I kind of forgot your question, but yeah, that's I think
No
you
worries.
should.
I think you made a really powerful point.
Yeah, but basically if आप climate activism या किसी भी मतलब activism में आप आ रहे हो, तो पहली चीज तो ये कि मतलब try to find a community, because that will help in understanding अच्छा issue exactly क्या है और कितना बड़ा issue है, और फिर you can see what everyone else is doing, and then you can contribute your unique ideas as to how to go about it. And for what's coming in the future from climate activists and from our side is and I mean we're all on the same side, but it is more protests, more strikes, more organizing, more mobilizing, and more conversations, more awareness, and just getting more people involved and getting more people to start those conversations and have those conversations with us and everyone else, and trying to understand other people's perspectives as well. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Hania. And finally, I'm going to move to Amira.
I just want to say that in whatever sector you are working in or whatever you're working in, you can contribute in climate change in some way. So no, everybody tries to do right by themselves, and whether even if someone's working in the fossil fuel industry, they're going to be thinking, oh, I'm providing energy to the world. So in whatever sector you are, wherever you're working, whatever you are, you can contribute in some way to climate change and climate action. So you just need to, like Farah said, you just need to talk about it to other people. Like Hania said, you need to find your community. We need to make climate change a basic thing that everyone talks about. Like it's something like poverty or health or education. It needs to become one of the primary things that we talk about in schools, especially. And the second thing I would say to everyone is to stop trusting corporations and to stop trusting big companies and start asking questions about where you get your stuff from, and demand better things from them, because these corporations, they can afford to give you better, and everyone deserves better. So stop trusting them, start asking questions, and start talking about it.
Thank you so much, Amira. So I think this brings us to the end of our conversation today. From Women in Energy, I would really like to thank our audience, but I'd especially like to thank the 5 young women with us today. Unfortunately, our friend from Peshawar, Fatma Faraz, was not able to join us. But I would personally like to thank Nida Afzal, Hania Imran, Amira Adil, Farah Munawar, and Rida Rashid for taking the time, not only to be a part of this call, obviously, but also for the activism that you people have been doing in your cities and the way that you've been leading climate action wherever you are. And I think I can speak for everyone. I'm very inspired by all of you. And I feel personally that the future is in safe hands every time I speak to you guys. So thank you very much on behalf of Women in Energy. And thank you very much to Women in Energy for hosting this Power Hour as well. So I think